He walked through those glass doors like he owned the place. No badge swipe, no security escort, just strolling in, wearing pristine white sneakers and some expensive blazer that screamed, "Trust Fund Kid." Everyone else had to go through the front desk checkpoint, not him. Instead, CEO Gerald Whitfield himself was there waiting. All smiles and handshakes like he'd just discovered the next Elon Musk. I'm Austin Torres, by the way, 48 years old. Been building cybersecurity systems at CyberGuard Solutions for 16 years. Started here right after my Army discharge when everyone thought government contracts were boring. Turns out the real threat would come from nepotism, not hackers. I stood by the elevator bank with my coffee getting cold, watching this kid who couldn't be older than 25 glide past security like he had diplomatic immunity. He didn't even look around until Gerald steered him my way. Then he turned, tilted his head, and smiled. "You must be Austin," he said, "sweet as pie. You're the one I'm replacing, right?" My mouth went dry. Something was off. "I don't think we've met," I managed, "and I haven't heard anything about transitions." He shrugged like it was no big deal. "Oh, maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything yet. I'm just shadowing Dad for now." Dad, of course. That explained everything and nothing at the same time. Lisa's words echoed in my head from our conversation over breakfast. At 48, Austin, you're not old, but you're not young in tech years. Companies love to say fresh perspective when they mean cheaper salary. The kid winked and followed the CEO into the elevator without looking back. The doors closed with that soft ding, and everything went quiet again. But something had shifted inside me, like back in deployment when you knew an attack was coming, but couldn't predict when. That familiar dread I remembered from Army days. The worst part, nobody else seemed to notice. Not the receptionist, not the junior developers, not even our VP of engineering who walked right past them without batting an eye. I stood there another minute, coffee cooling in my hand, my badge suddenly feeling heavier around my neck. The same badge I'd worn through 2 major acquisitions, 3 system overhauls, and countless late nights fixing other people's mistakes. Something was happening, and it had already started without me. Lisa had been right to worry. The mortgage on our Phoenix house wasn't going anywhere. And with Katie finishing college next year, this wasn't the time for career uncertainty. But in tech, uncertainty was the only constant. I'd learned that lesson watching colleagues disappear during the 2008 recession, then again during various digital transformations that were really just cost-cutting measures dressed up in buzzwords. That night, I sat at our kitchen table, Lisa across from me, grading papers. She taught high school math, steady income, steady schedule, steady everything. The opposite of my world, where disruption was celebrated and experience was often seen as baggage. "How was work?" she asked, without looking up from her red pen. "Interesting," I said, then told her about the kid, about the replacement comment, about Dad. Lisa set down her pen. "Nepotism hire shows up and says he's replacing you. Could be a misunderstanding, could be wishful thinking on his part, but Lisa knew me too well. Austin, you've got that look, the same one you had when they brought in that consulting firm 2 years ago." She was right. The consulting firm had recommended modernizing leadership structures and leveraging digital native perspectives. Translation: older employees were expensive and outdated. Half the senior staff was gone within 6 months. Replaced by people who could code React, but had never lived through a real security breach. "Maybe it's time to update the resume," I said. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You built that place, Austin. That cybersecurity platform handles what? 40% of their government contracts, closer to 60%. But building something and owning it are different things." "What do you mean?" I'd never told her about the IP contract from 2020. How CyberGuard's legal team had tried to get me to sign over all rights to my architectural work. How I'd refused because their terms were too broad, would let them patent my innovations under company ownership, even for non-CyberGuard projects. How they'd said it was standard, everyone signed. How I'd replied that I wasn't everyone. "Nothing," I said, "just tech industry politics." But that night, lying in bed, listening to Lisa's steady breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The kid's confident smile, Gerald's obvious favoritism, the way he'd known my name before we'd met. This wasn't random, this was planned. I thought about our emergency fund. 4 months of expenses, maybe 5 if we cut back. Katie's college tuition was already budgeted. Lisa's teacher salary was steady but modest. At 48, with 16 years of experience, I should have been hitting my peak earning years. Instead, I felt like I was standing on shifting ground, watching younger employees get promoted, while experience became corporate code for expensive. The next morning, I got to the office early, like always. The parking lot was nearly empty, just security and the overseas team finishing their shift. This was my favorite time. Quiet servers humming in the distance. No meetings, no politics, just pure problem solving. I'd fixed more critical vulnerabilities before 8 a.m. than most people handled all day. But today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of an ending I hadn't asked for. I didn't even finish my morning coffee before my computer chimed. Meeting request immediate. No subject line, no details, just a timestamp and location. Executive Conference Room B. That room was reserved for board meetings and terminations. In 16 years, I'd only been in there twice. Once for my promotion to senior architect. Once when they laid off the entire compliance department. The walk down that hallway felt longer than usual. Each step echoed off the polished floors, past motivational posters about innovation and teamwork that suddenly felt like mockery. I thought about Lisa's packed lunch sitting in my desk drawer, the thermos of coffee she'd made me that morning, the way she'd kissed my forehead and said, "Have a good day, honey," like it was any other Tuesday. The door was cracked when I arrived. Gerald sat at the head of the polished table, hands folded, staring at the wood grain like it might start talking. Next to him was Dana from HR, wearing that neutral expression that only meant one thing. And there was Jordan Whitfield sitting in the CTO's usual chair with a tablet glowing in his lap, looking like he already belonged. "Austin," Gerald began, voice carefully rehearsed. "You've been with us a long time, longer than most people stay in this industry." I nodded, unsure if that was a compliment or a death sentence. In tech, longevity could be seen as dedication or inability to adapt. At 48, I'd watched enough culture shifts to know which way this was heading. But companies evolve, technology changes, leadership needs to reflect the future we're building. The silence that followed could have choked a horse. I glanced at Jordan, who was typing something on his tablet with the focused intensity of someone live tweeting their victory. It's time we embrace new energy. Jordan Whitfield will lead that transition. The phrase new energy rang in my ears. Not fresh perspective or different approach. New energy. As if my 16 years of preventing their disasters and securing their networks had somehow drained the company's batteries. "This is a restructuring?" I asked. Dana leaned forward with practiced sympathy. "This isn't about performance, Austin. It's about realigning with our evolving brand vision. Corporate speak for "you're fired," but we're too cowardly to say it. I'd heard variations of this speech before, delivered to colleagues who'd suddenly become redundant or misaligned with company objectives. It was the same script, just with my name plugged in. Gerald slid a folder across the table. "We've prepared a generous exit package." The folder felt heavy when I opened it. Termination agreement, severance terms that looked reasonable on paper, but wouldn't cover Katie's final year. And there at the bottom, 3 signatures. Mine was missing, but the third name made my stomach drop. Chris Anderson, my closest ally in the IT department, the guy I'd mentored for 12 years through every crisis, every late-night emergency, every system migration. He'd signed off on removing me. The ink was barely dry, but his signature was there, in blue ballpoint, neat and decisive. No hesitation marks, no signs of reluctance, just his name, approving my termination like it was any other purchase order. "Can I say goodbye to my team?" I managed to ask. "Of course," Dana said with that fake smile, "but we'd appreciate discretion." Discretion. Like 16 years of my life could be swept under the rug without making anyone uncomfortable. Like the hundreds of late nights I'd spent securing their networks. The weekends I'd sacrificed to keep their systems running. The innovations I'd built that became their competitive advantage. All of it could be handled with discretion. I closed the folder and stood up slowly. "How long do I have?" "End of business today," Gerald said. "Security will escort you out at 5 p.m. Security escort. Like I was a criminal instead of the guy who'd kept their infrastructure from collapsing during 3 major cyber attacks. The same infrastructure Jordan was apparently inheriting, along with my access codes, my documentation, my architectural decisions that had taken years to implement and perfect. Walking back to my office felt surreal. The hallways that had been my second home for nearly 2 decades suddenly felt foreign, like I was trespassing in someone else's building. Colleagues I'd worked with for years avoided eye contact, suddenly finding their phones or such paperwork fascinating. Word traveled fast in our industry, and everyone knew the score. I started packing in silence. My office felt smaller than usual, like it was already shrinking to accommodate my absence. The coffee mug with security first printed on it. The photo of Lisa and Katie from last year's company picnic. The little flag from my army unit that somehow survived every office move and late-night coding session. All of it stamped with an expiration date I hadn't seen coming. People walked past my open door, but nobody stopped, not even to say sorry or good luck. The hallway went quiet like the whole building knew what was happening, and nobody wanted to get too close. Maybe they were afraid termination was contagious, that acknowledging my situation would somehow put their own jobs at risk. I was stuffing the last of my notebooks into a cardboard box when Chris appeared in my doorway. He hesitated, then stepped halfway in, looking everywhere except at me. His face had that pale, guilty look of someone who just hit a dog with their car. "Austin, He started, then stopped. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I didn't know how else to handle it, he finally said. "You signed it, Chris. You had a choice." He looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. "They told me it was either go along or risk the whole department getting restructured. Said my name was next on the list. I've got twins starting college next year, and Sarah's been out of work since her company downsized. The same financial pressures I faced, the same middle-age vulnerability in an industry that worshipped youth. But that didn't excuse betrayal. You used to have principles too," I said quietly. He winced. "I'm sorry, Austin. I really am. Sorry didn't pay my mortgage or fund Katie's education. Sorry didn't erase his signature from my termination papers. When did they revoke my admin access?" I asked. He froze. "What?" "I checked the logs yesterday. My credentials were stripped 5 days ago." His voice barely reached me. "They said they had to move fast, that you already knew about the transition." I didn't. 5 days. They'd been planning this while I was still showing up early, fixing their bugs, keeping their $430 million cybersecurity system from failing, while Lisa and I were discussing Katie's graduation plans over dinner, assuming we had job security. I picked up my badge from the desk. Austin Torres, Senior Security Architect. The magnetic strip caught the fluorescent light one last time before I set it down next to my empty coffee mug. Chris turned to leave, shoulders hunched with guilt. "Chris," I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. "When you're explaining this to your twins, make sure you tell them how easy it was." The walk to my car felt like a funeral march. The cardboard box felt heavier with each step. Not because of its contents, but because of what it represented. Lisa would be getting home from school in an hour, expecting to hear about my day. Maybe planning dinner around my usual 6 p.m. arrival. Instead, I'd be walking through our front door at 2:30 p.m. with a box of personal items and news that would reshape our entire financial future. The drive home gave me time to think, and thinking led me to remember something important. That night, sitting in my home office with my personal laptop, the one that never touched CyberGuard's network, I started digging through old emails. I typed intellectual property transfer 2020 and hit enter. There it was, like a gift from my past self. An email thread from CyberGuard's legal team asking me to sign a document transferring full rights of my architectural work to company ownership. I'd refused, not out of spite, but principle. Their wording was too broad, would let them sell or license the system without my consent, even for projects unrelated to CyberGuard's core business. I'd told them I wasn't signing until they revised it to reflect collaborative ownership. They'd said it was standard that everyone signed. I'd replied that I wasn't everyone. The thread ended with my response. "Until revisions are made to reflect reasonable scope, I cannot sign this document." They never replied. More importantly, they never followed up. In the chaos of deadlines and product launches, they'd forgotten or assumed I'd caved eventually. But I never did. And now I had proof. I scrolled down to the attached contract. The PDF was still there, unsigned. The signature field under my name was blank, untouched after all these years. That's when I remembered something else. I searched for IP clarification meeting notes and found it. A summary from CyberGuard's internal counsel, dated October 18, 2020. Due to the nature of Austin Torres's independent development, prior to formal integration with company systems, explicit signature is required to enforce IP transfer. Without it, legal ownership may be contestable. There it was in writing from their own legal team. My system, the foundation of CyberGuard's government security platform, their threat detection algorithms, their whole competitive advantage, wasn't theirs. Not legally. They'd forgotten to get the one thing they needed, my signature. Lisa found me there an hour later, still staring at the screen. "Austin, you're home early." I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her set down her teacher bag and sit in the chair beside me. "They let me go," I said simply. Her face went through several emotions. Surprise, anger, worry, then determination. Severance? 6 months plus benefits continuation. College fund will be tight, but Katie can still graduate. Might need to take out loans for the difference. She was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, what about the system you built? Can't you take that knowledge somewhere else? I showed her the emails, explained the unsigned contract, the legal gray area I'd unknowingly created. It's more complicated than that. But yes, technically what I built doesn't fully belong to them. So, what happens now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number, Austin Torres, professional voice, crisp accent. "This is Preston Hayes, CEO of Fortress Security Systems. Word gets around fast in our industry. We heard about the transition at CyberGuard. Fortress Security, CyberGuard's biggest competitor, the company we'd crushed in last year's Department of Defense contract bid, the same company that had been trying to poach our senior engineers for months. We've also heard about recent system instabilities," he continued. "Frankly, Austin, we'd rather not reinvent the wheel. We're interested in what you built, more specifically, what you could build next." I looked at Lisa, who was listening intently. Her teacher's instincts had kicked in. She could sense this was important. "I'm authorized to offer full architectural control, clean budget, no red tape, and equity participation if you're willing to lead our infrastructure division." This wasn't just a job offer. It was an invitation to rebuild on my terms. With CyberGuard's biggest rival funding the effort, with my family's financial future secured by someone who actually valued experience over youth. "I'd like to discuss this further," I said finally. "Naturally, we'll fly you out first class tomorrow if you're available." After hanging up, Lisa squeezed my hand. That sounded promising. It did, but there's something else I need to do first. I turned back to the laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. 3 years ago, during a chaotic migration, I'd created a test environment, a sandbox mirror of CyberGuard's core architecture, hidden, forgotten by everyone except me. Time to see if they'd been taking care of my baby while I was gone. I've always believed code tells the truth when people lie. That belief guided me through 16 years of debugging crises and pulling all-nighters to keep systems running. People panic. People mislead. But code shows you exactly what's happening if you know where to look. 3 years ago, during a chaotic migration, I'd created a test environment, a sandbox mirror of CyberGuard's core architecture for simulations and stress testing. I'd registered it under a dummy account, Ghost47, to avoid unnecessary bottlenecks. Spun it up late one night while waiting for a vendor patch. It had no permissions to push live changes, but full visibility into everything happening inside the infrastructure. Best of all, it wasn't connected to the main admin registry. Nobody from HR, nobody from executive leadership, not even Chris knew it existed. I logged in, the dashboard lit up like I'd never left. And there he was. Jordan had gone live, not just using the system I'd built. He was inside the original architecture, directly manipulating base layers of code, touching things that should have been locked down, tweaking scripts he clearly didn't understand. No version control, no backup staging, no audit logs enabled. He was rebuilding a Formula One engine with a socket wrench. I clicked through the branches and found something that made my stomach drop. He'd renamed multiple core files to match his own convention. Worse, he'd removed several integrity checks from the threat detection algorithm, probably thinking they were legacy bloat. They weren't. Those checks prevented cascading failures when multiple agencies accessed the systems simultaneously. Without them, The platform was vulnerable to real-time security distortion. He was playing with a nuclear reactor and treating it like a microwave. But here's the thing. I could have shut it down right then. One command. Instead, I navigated to a dormant kernel module I'd installed years ago as a failsafe, designed to detect unauthorized privilege escalations and trigger lockout if it sensed tampering. Now, I updated it, rewrote the condition logic. If admin account A Torres is removed or disabled, trigger Cascade Lock protocol. Cascade Lock didn't delete anything. It rendered the entire system non-functional, a soft kill. Every process would stall indefinitely. Data would remain intact but unreadable, untouchable, unusable until reversed by biometric confirmation. And I was the only one who could unlock it. I typed it all manually. No automated scripts, no audit trails, encrypted the change, embedded it under 6 layers of decoy comments, then exited. Before logging out, I screenshotted Jordan's activity logs, timestamps of his changes, his user ID, his file paths. If anything went wrong, he'd be the last user on record, not me. I named the file inheritance.pdf because that's what he'd called it, right? A foundation he was inheriting. The next morning, Lisa kissed me goodbye as I headed to the airport. "Knock 'em dead in Seattle," she said. "Show them what 16 years of experience looks like." Preston Hayes met me at the gate himself, late 40s, sharp suit, old school manners. His CTO, Alan Rodriguez, was waiting in the car, quiet guy with keen eyes and a reputation for respecting experience over trends. By 4 p.m., I was in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the Seattle skyline, walking them through the structure I'd built for CyberGuard and the improved version I intended to create. By 6 p.m., a private server cluster was provisioned, clean, and waiting. But rebuilding isn't just about writing new code. It's about clearing the debris left behind. Back at my hotel, I pulled up a browser and searched Secure Core Next, the name Jordan had slapped on my system. The results made my blood pressure spike. His LinkedIn post, press releases, even a tech blog calling him the visionary behind Secure Core's revolutionary approach. Then I checked the U.S. Copyright Office database, filed March 8th. Owner, Jordan Whitfield. Platform, Secure Core. Next, filed under original software architecture. He hadn't just rebranded my system. He'd filed it under his name as if he'd created it, used nearly identical descriptors from a white paper I'd written in 2019. This wasn't ignorance, this was theft. I opened the Copyright Office's infringement portal. Anonymous submission. Attach the white paper, development logs, metadata files, screenshots from my Ghost account. Added a timeline explaining the missing IP transfer and duplication of original logic. Hit submit. Let the system handle it. At 2:15 p.m. the next day, sitting in Fortress's secure development lab, I opened my laptop one final time. Remote terminal authenticated to my Ghost node, one of the last bridges between my original system and what CyberGuard believed they controlled. I flexed my fingers, took a breath, and typed one command, then 2, then a pause. Not showmanship, precision. 6 lines of code. I hit enter. 6 seconds. That's all it took. At 2:16 p.m., the signal went out across every satellite office, every distribution server, every government node. Secure Core Next ceased to exist. Not crashed, frozen, locked at the root level, timeouts cascaded across continents. At CyberGuard HQ, I imagined Jordan panicking, phone in one hand, lawyers in the other, desperately trying to understand why backups weren't working, why redundancy failed. Because what they didn't know, I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd moved it. 2 weeks ago, under routine maintenance they'd assumed was a patch, I'd executed silent data migration, complete clone with encryption and key splitting. That clone now lived on Fortress's private servers. What CyberGuard was left with was a hollow shell, gorgeous outside, rotted underneath. My phone rang at 3:45 p.m. Gerald Whitfield. "Austin," he began, voice strained. "We have a situation." I listened to him scramble, offering consulting fees, equity restoration, anything to get me back. When he finished, I said simply, "Gerald, I'm not your employee. I don't owe you anything. But you built this. Don't you care that it's falling apart?" I care that it's finally free of people who didn't deserve it. 6 months later, I walked back through CyberGuard's glass doors. Only now, the sign read, Fortress Phoenix Division. Inside the lobby, framed behind the reception desk, was a portrait of me, pointing at a whiteboard. Below it, Austin Torres, architect of the future. Chris approached me in the hallway, now interim CTO, after Gerald's resignation. Austin, Save it, Chris. You made your choice. I walked to my new office overlooking the mountains. Senior VP of Engineering and Infrastructure, 3% equity, direct report to the board. On my desk sat that same brass pen from my 15th anniversary, engraved, "To those who build quietly." I signed Fortress's latest patent filing, then whispered to myself, "You fired a name. You forgot the mind. Some people shout to show power. I prefer to build." And at 48, with Lisa proud and Katie's future secure, I was just getting started. The military taught me patience. Tech taught me precision. But they taught me something else entirely. Never underestimate the guy who actually knows how the system works. The view from my new corner office was spectacular. Phoenix stretched out below, full of possibilities I was finally free to explore.